Hello and welcome to another episode of The Defenders on Sunset TV. And in this episode, we have a special guest with us. Former Chief of Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal RKS Bhadauria, who's with us for the first time. Welcome on the show, sir. And we would be enlightened, I'm sure, with your comments on a variety of issues concerning the Indian Air Force, the whole prospect of more and more indigenization, and more specifically, what just made the news was the ceremony that marked the induction of the LCH, the helicopter, the attack version, which is now part of the IAF and also would be coming into the army in large numbers. The LCH is a unique platform. You know that better than me. It has been designed specifically to fulfill a number of operational requirements. These operational requirements came into being and became prominent in the Kargil conflict. You've been a pilot too. How do you feel that the LCH provides the kind of firepower and the need for troops in battle to take on enemies, especially in the Himalayan ranges, which is something that we felt the need for during the Kargil conflict. We didn't have, so our fighter aircrafts served that purpose. How does it work differently, apart from the fact that it flies at slower speeds? What is its efficacy on the mountainous battlefield compared to a fighter aircraft?
Okay, as far as light combat helicopter is concerned, as you mentioned, post Kargil, we froze this requirement and started in a big way in terms of getting this capability. And it's unique, I think, performance criteria of being able to deliver at high altitude is what is most important. And from that perspective, in mountainous regions, in high altitude, this is probably the best in its class today in the world. So we must firstly understand that where LCH has put us in high altitude warfare, we're absolutely top class. Now, in terms of weapons and vis-a-vis fighters, where it can operate, mountainous regions, in support of ground troops in particular, you need an area, there is a zone wherein attack helicopter has much more access, closer access in terms of putting weapons on the target, in terms of supporting the ground troops, be it anti-vehicles, anti-tanks, many of the targets that ground troops would want taken out. Also, from point of view of suppressing their air defense, their radars, they're close to the front line of own troops and line of control. So it has some unique capabilities in that. Because of its slow speed, its access and ability to operate in those regions is little different.
Yes.
Fighter gives it another class wherein from a distance you can hit the targets, be it LGVs, be it precision guided munitions. So there is a class of targets that fighters would take on, and in conjunction and in coordination, there is a class of targets that the attack helicopters will.
And it has a good standoff distance, so therefore our troops on the ground are not able to engage it very effectively.
Absolutely, it has good. And in coordination with the ground troops, for example, the standoff that you mentioned, good about 4 to 5 kilometer standoff already exists. We'll probably put another class of weapons which will give us about 20 to 30 kilometers non-line of sight. So there is a huge
yes, I have read that it is a process in the works.
Yeah.
It will keep improving.
Yeah.
I'll move from there very quickly to one or two other strategic areas, because you as chief would have seen that. It has been noticed over the last several years that the Indian Air Force has been able to serve the political purpose, because war is an extension of politics by other means, to quote Clausewitz's oft-repeated line. So it does serve the political agenda. The strikes in Balakot in particular were a case in point. How is it that the IAF hopes to continue to achieve those political objectives with its dwindling capacity of top of the line punch, which is in terms of fighter aircrafts?
Yeah, looking at the future, I think it's a very pertinent issue, and the way we are developing towards continuing to remain very highly credible is by putting a lot of emphasis on our indigenous production, on our Atmanirbharta drive. And I think LCA is the game changer from in the fighter fleet in terms of our own industry. And LCH in a similar manner is a game changer on the helicopter side in terms of attack capability, I must mention. Further, D&D efforts as LCA follow-up, LCA Mark 1A, LCA Mark 2, and AMCA has already been cleared in terms of D&D. This is what will give us the required indigenous capability. But very important issue is dwindling numbers. And I think that is where HAL and everybody who comes into the production, later on I'm hoping that private sector would come in a big way, needs to step up the rate of production. Like Mark 1A, we need to go beyond 8 to 16 straight away. We've been talking about it for years. That is what will make up for numbers quickly. And similarly, whatever orders are placed for Mark 2, we should start with 16 a year from the word go. So these are issues that we need to keep in mind from our indigenous production.
Two quick questions, sir. One is, we keep talking of indigenization, and we talked about the LCH also as a great made in India initiative. But what I have read, about 50% plus minus of a lot of its wherewithal is not made in India. So therefore, is that truly something we can boast about made in India, particularly if you look in the LCH? The engines have come from French origin. So, and engines, as you would know better than all of us, are the mainstay of any fighting platform in the air. So, how is it that we can ensure we achieve that indigenization to then say the rest of the items that we get from anywhere else are just frills?
Again, in terms of indigenization percentage, LCH is around 55, LCA is around 60, LCH will go up to 65, but correctly pointed out, engines is the crux. Forget the level of indigenization, but from point of view of indigenous capability, both for LCA or LCA class, later on Mark 2, AMCA, we have to have our own engine on the fighter stream, own engine on the helicopter side, a derivative of Shakti. And similarly for UCAV and UAVs, we should need to start now on engine. Engine is a big gap in our indigenous capability.
And what is stopping us there?
I think there was a lot of effort with GTRE on the fighter engine, which did not succeed. It might give us a result on the UCAV side, but we need to go into a joint production or a joint R&D effort quickly and make up for this lost time on the fighter side. Similarly, helicopter, I think progress has already started, but we need to set it up quickly.
So, is a transfer of technology completely at home through a private sector initiative jointly working with DPSUs the answer?
I would say from the current standpoint, a combination of joint venture and an element of R&D, because the current thrust levels don't suit AMCA, for example. And therefore, there will be an element of joint R&D which should go in for a joint project. Okay. And that partner should be chosen quickly, and this is an area which is kind of slipping, and as an indigenous aviation industry, it needs to be really tackled on highest priority.
Okay, back to the LCH and the LCA. Large number of orders are expected to be given for both these. In the interim, we are the likelihood, at least I'm speculating, of FMS deals to make up the numbers quickly, because the whole selection and shortlisting process, you know better than I, it takes at least 10 to 15 years if we go by the Rafale example. How many aircrafts and fighters can we see by the end of the decade in percentage terms making up the shortfall that exists, that is made in India?
You mean apart from LCA and its...
LCA, LCH primarily, these are what we are boasting make in India and made in India. Now, what percentage of these will make up our fleet by the end of the decade?
On the LCA side, I think 40 we already have, 83 is what is on order, 6 counts of Mark II, the current chief has already made a statement, they are going to place an order. Now, this is actually huge. And over the next 10 years, if you ask me, complete 83, and I again say that the production rate needs to be stepped up. and similarly it will follow up onto Mark II. I would expect half the Mark II fleet and complete Mark 1A fleet to be in by in the next 10 years. LCH again a follow-up. Air Force requirement is 60, Army is 90. That complete delivery should take place within this time.
Okay.
Percentage wise, we have a big fleet of Su-30. The Jaguars and MiG-29 will start phasing out in another couple of years. MiG-21s would have gone in next 3 years. So by 10 years to 15 years, we should be 70 odd percent looking at indigenous.
But our adversaries are not going to wait for 10 years to give us that window.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how are we going to be, I think that is the biggest strategic challenge in front of the Air Force.
Yeah.
Not quite really coming up with their own doctrine, because doctrines in best of cases in the three services are just about somewhere at acceptable level, but then there is no, from what I know, no inter-service doctrine where everyone seems to be. So are we looking at the Air Force fighting wars on its own terms of reference, and the other two are going to continue with their territorial or maritime engagements, or are we looking at inter-service synergy? That is one. And the second thing is, how is it that the balancing act can be done in the interim, because danger is looming around our borders all the time?
Yeah, in terms of synergy, I think it's a fallacy that the synergy doesn't exist between three services in terms of doctrinal and other issues. It is not so. It will be absolutely synergistic effort, and I think a glimpse of that you saw in our response on the northern borders on the China front. It was absolutely synergistic, and that's what is going to happen. So that doubt should not be there at all.
So they keep saying that with the coming of the CDS, the main primary challenge for the CDS is to try and integrate and create a complete consensus on a number of issues. Now, how is he going to do anything more than what already exists?
No, there is a synergy that exists in terms of operation and how we will, operate together. With CDS coming in, the structures for joint structures and the integrated structures that would come up would undergo a change, and that is what needs to be decided and finalized.
Okay.
But in terms of our war fighting, it must be understood that even today, if there is going to be a conflict, it will be absolutely synergistic effort. There is a lot of work that has gone on, and it's a continuous effort.
Okay.
71 itself was synergistic. I hear a comment often that we were not coordinated, etc. It is not so.
71 was your classic example of how future wars should have been fought, and it was fought in the past.
Absolutely.
But what we are looking at now is another issue, and that issue seems to really be the key also, is that our ability to coerce our adversary simply by what they see as our intent, because your intent can be coercive also. And that intent was last exhibited by a very large Air Force driven exercise, operational exercise that was taken all over the subcontinent, where the Air Force exhibited its ability to operate effectively from the Himalayas to the Andamans and Nicobar. Could you throw light on that?
Yeah, coercive intent, I think, was after that shown in even post Galwan, the way Army Air Force deployed and our intent. In terms of capability, unless we have continuous capability enhancement and contemporary capability, we have to keep that going to be coercive, to have coercive deterrent. In terms of future that you mentioned, to be able to continue with this kind of capability or enhance it, I think currently Rafale induction was what gave it a big flip. BrahMos modification on Su-30 gave us a big capability jump. And similarly, a lot of indigenous weapons, be it Astra and a lot of sensors, have given us our own capability to have this kind of approach. In the future, this is what needs to be built upon much further. Again, under Atmanirbharta, this is what we need to capitalize on. And for this kind of intent, you really have to have the weapons and sensors which are top class, which would outclass the enemy. And in our scenario, I think what is more important is to recognize for the future the impact of cyber and space.
Yes.
The impact of AI and automation, big data handling, networking, ability to communicate data and not get intercepted, the cyber related issues. The quantum technologies which is coming in now, we need to have a plan in place to start to capitalize on that in the very near future. So these are issues that we need to tackle straight away, and I'm sure Air Force is doing a lot towards this as the other services, and we would have to keep a disrupting technological edge with us. We may not be able to compete in numbers and technologies across the board, but there must be some niche technologies or capability that we need to develop, and that will give us this edge.
Okay, another question that in terms of our growing strategic partnership with the Americans vis-a-vis the Russians, both want to continue to be platform providers to us. We have certain platforms from both. The IAF in particular has visible platforms from both. The MiGs and the Sukhois on one side, the C-17s and C-130s on the other side, the Apache helicopters also. Now, how is it that when we go in for Atmanirbharta in full clip, as you are suggesting, increase production, increase the numbers, how is it that these countries are going to look at India well? Because one of the reasons that gets them to look at India in a friendly manner is the potential to do business in India. Now, if this business is stalled, do you think the utterings from these big powers in terms of strategic partnership will be with the same level of energy that we are seeing today?
Oh, I think they need to change their mindset towards us, and we need to build our indigenous capability, and this mindset will change. They looked at us differently when we were buying a lot of equipment from them, both sides, and when we have our own equipment, there will be other avenues of areas of cooperation and support, and we would be from a position of strength, and we should not hesitate at all, and I'm sure they will adapt to it.
Okay.
They will adapt, and in the region we are going to be a major player, and they would really look for avenues and ways that we cooperate together, and on the world front we are together.
Okay, and last quick point, and I need to understand from you that India wants to consolidate the intent of each of the forces within the national security umbrella. Now, the Air Force at this point of time, perhaps even continuing so in the years ahead, is the most visible element of putting your muscle across the borders. Do you see a role for the Air Force even in internal issues, because there are national security challenges internally, whether we talk about the Naxal issue, whether we talk about providing quick movement of troops in the case of ground mobilization, not so much as air movement. Where all do you see the role for Air Force?
No, I think something that you already mentioned, there is a huge role, especially in surveillance, in communication, in ability to move troops to the right place, and in ability to be able to act in real time. Air Force has a huge capability to be a very fast responder, and that is what needs to be capitalized even for situations like this, be it movements or be it bringing in non-kinetic means. The kinetic means are a little tricky in internal security situations,
right?
But non-kinetic for sure, and surveillance and ability to put people quickly there is one of the fastest ways to involve Air Force.
Okay, so wonderful responses from you, sir, and I am certainly enlightened. I'm sure our viewers will also have been enlightened. You'll have to bear with us till we go on air and connect to the Managing Director of Hindustan Aeronautics Limited and former Chairman, Mr. Suvarna Raju. I'm sure you would have met him. Mr. Raju, welcome on the show. And I'm sure you'd be familiar with former Air Chief Marshal, Air Chief Marshal Bhadauria. And we've been looking at the big picture. But I'll go straight to you to ask a few questions about your great achievement in creating the LCH. What led you to create the LCH? apart from the experience of Kargil and the governmental approval of the CCS that go ahead produce something like this, how were you able to create a product which is world record breaking in so many areas? The altitude it flies in, the unique role it achieves, the multiple weapon platforms it carries, and of course giving the unusual cockpit and other arrangements to the pilot. Where did you really go about it? Was it completely an in-house design, or did you study all the models outside in the world and said we'll come up with something better?
Really, LCH was conceptualized, designed, manufactured. I mean, it's totally designed by the Indian engineers and scientists. First is that we get the specifications written by our customer, Indian Air Force, based on the requirements, which have been, I think we have got this specification in 2006, and then CCS approved onto it. But we bought in our experience of light combat helicopter, advanced light helicopter. So that took us quite some time. Maybe we took around 15 years to bring that into the service. But then if you look at this light combat helicopter, I think we could mature this product in 9 years. That means in 2017, we had the initial operation clearance for this. And then we fired the rockets, and then it has the stealth configuration onto it. And then the roles have been very well defined for us to design onto it, except for a radar on the top of it. It could do everything what a foreign helicopter which you have bought in can do it.
Okay,
and this is absolutely indigenous design.
That's very encouraging.
That is why we have our authority onto this thing. Tomorrow we need to fire a rocket or a missile. So we have the wherewithal to integrate any kind of a sensor onto it, and the survivability of this helicopter is much more because we use the armored panels onto it. And then I'm sure, Maroof Saab, you would have seen this in the Aero India while doing its aerobatics. Generally, from a negative, this thing, the way it is agile and then it could be operated and maneuvered, really gives us a very strength for our armed forces.
Yes, very well put, sir. Very well put, sir. And now I want to ask a question which I don't have answers to, and I'm sure you can educate me. I'm aware that Indian troops, because this is really in support of ground operations to a great extent in the Himalayan front line, and I'm aware that our Indian troops are operating in heights beyond 16,500 feet, which is the flying ceiling of the LCH. So, two quick questions. Can it be pushed beyond 16,500 as the Air Force pilots have been pushing the Cheetah and the Chetak to get to posts in the Siachen Glacier? Or can it serve the purpose of those areas which are 16,500 and below, which is largely the Kargil heights and in the LAC area, and we leave Siachen Glacier to the tenacity of earlier pilots who are continuing to fly Chetaks and Cheetah despite the fact that the bodies are so brittle?
Yeah, as you said, Maroof, this is the unique platform in the world which can operate at the heights of 18,000 feet. And we have launched, landed and took off all the trials during the prototype testing. We did prove the capability of this combat helicopter, and unlike the Cheetah Chetaks, which would be operating at 14,000, because those have a specific blades. We have a 85 series blades to be used if Cheetah Chetaks have to operate in those conditions. But this is designed with the carbon composite blades. It's an indigenous, our own design, and these composite blades which are designed to give this power to the helicopter to operate at the highest launch pads.
Okay, wonderful. Another question, and this is with regard to the mainstay, as I was discussing with the former Air Chief, the mainstay of any aerial platform is the engine. Now, I believe here the engines are coming from the French. What is the timeline in which you are thinking of producing your own engines and not being dependent on outside, because global situations being what they are, suddenly you might need them and the supplier may not provide, or are there watertight arrangements with suppliers like the French that come what may, you will continue to keep getting the engine? Going back to the experience of the air tunnels not being available for trying out the LCA's engine, and the disadvantage our scientists face when they reach the US, and due to our nuclear test, the Americans put an embargo and sent our people back, and our scientists and the HAL and DRDO have been blamed for the delays in the LCA when it was no fault of ours.
Yes, Maroof. So before going on to this engine part of it, with the former chief who's sitting right in with you, we had the opportunity. He is the one who gave me clearance to operate the LCH, my prototype light combat helicopters, to participate in the Operation Gagan Shakti. We fired the rockets from there, along with the other Air Force fleet. So that gave a very good confidence to our customer. And then we gave these platforms to be operated in the forward area for some time. That's how we build the confidence. Coming back to your question on the engines, this engine, Adrenaline, we are manufacturing under license, transfer of technology from Saffron in India, and it is called Shakti. So we have the indigenous capability of manufacturing all the components. Yes, there is a dependency of few castings and forgings. Leaving that, everything of that engine is being manufactured in India. That's number one. Number two, as you rightly said, all our helicopters, leaving the Russian origin, all the engines are from Saffron. So when I was in the chair and then I've met the chef, all my eggs are in one basket. If anything to happen, Cheetah Chetak, Advanced Light Helicopter, LCH, LUH, everyone, all the engines on this are there. So HL has launched an indigenous product in 2017 Def Expo. This was the test engine was run by the then Defense Minister Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, and I understand this engine is now completing its tests and it is at the high altitude test. So we would be able to commercialize or productionize this engine maybe from 24 to 36 months of it, and then this 1200 kilowatt engine would be useful for all our helicopters, this ALH, LCH, LUH. So I think the self-dependency for this engine is not far. We'll be right on the dot.
Okay, so I'm completely out of time, sir, but I am thoroughly educated, and I can say with some pride that many of our viewers would also be educated of what the indigenization efforts are on in the country and the good work that HAL is doing in association with the punch that India's IAF brings onto India's battlefield scenario. Until our next episode, thanks very much for your inputs and thank you for watching. Goodbye.